Sow a thought, reap an act. Sow an act, reap a habit. Sow a habit, reap a character. Sow a character, reap a destiny. Fat funny guy on a podcast. So, I was listening to a podcast recently called Bacialy. Highly recommend you listen to it, by the way. And one of the guests said that quote, and I was like, that's actually pretty true, isn't it? Maybe think that verse in 1 James 15 that says, each one is tempted when he is carried away and enticed by his own lust. And when his lust is conceived, he gives birth to sin. And when sin is accomplished, it brings forth death. Let me get this picture from James of how sin kind of grows until one day it's big enough to murder you in your sleep. And I get I'm kind of using some interpretive license here. But hey, the feelers do it all the time. So I figure the world isn't going to end if I do it once. Anyway, what I'm getting at is this growing nature of sin is something we all, including myself, should really take more note of. Like, character isn't gained overnight. It's something you grow into. And on the flip side, it's not something you just put off. Like, a lot of times, I know I have a habit I've wanted to break. I pray to God about something along those lines like, God, can't you just take away the desire altogether? I mean, sure, there are exceptions. God has a tendency to do whatever he wants. But for the most part, that's just not how things work. You don't just go from a habit to a thought-free mind like, snap. I can't snap, actually. To break a habit that requires, to break a habit requires action. And action requires thought. And only once you've done those steps can you actually get out of sin altogether. I think that a lot of us, including myself, tend not to realize just how things work and have unrealistic expectations of God or our sin. On the other side, though, this whole stairs to destiny thing can totally be used to your advantage. I've been learning about Aristotle's virtue ethics as of late, and he basically says that what a person does, he becomes. So if you act virtuously all the time, you actually become virtuous. So if you want to become a better Christian, act like one. And I know, when you first hear that, it sounds like I'm claiming you should fake it till you make it, but I don't think that's quite accurate. Say you're trying to learn how to play soccer because you suck. That could be framed in a fake it till you make it light. After all, you're not really a soccer player. But, as we all know, if you play soccer enough, not only will you become a soccer player, but you'll actually become a good one. So really, instead of fake it till you make it, it's more like do it till you become it. I think the same applies to being a Christian. If you want to be kind, then step one, stop acting like a jerk. And if you stop acting like a jerk, stop thinking like one. Then finally, once you stop thinking like one, stop being one. Pulls an emotional dagger out of someone's unidentifiable heart, wipes the blood in his pants, and suddenly realizes he's looking at him. What? Looks at the body and then back to you. Oh, just because it's true doesn't mean I do it. Yeah, I really should take my own advice in this area. Besides, emotionally murdering people hasn't really been that advantageous anyway. All that to say, I think a lot of us have this weird notion we shouldn't do things we don't want to do because that's acting on our own strength. Rubs his face. No! You know what acting on your own strength looks like? Sinning! When you burst out in rage, that's acting on your own strength. No help from God required. But when you cool your temper because you want to do what's right, that's acting on God's strength. Do we really think we can do the right things for the right reasons without God's help? Massages his temples. Sorry, this misconception really bugs me. I seriously don't know where in the Bible people get it from. I mean, it just says love your enemies, and newsflash, if they're your enemies, you aren't going to feel like loving them. But guess what? Jesus says do it anyway. I mean, in James 1:2, he says, consider it all joy, my brethren, when you encounter various trials. Obviously, if they're trials, they're not going to feel like joy. But he says to consider it joy anyway. Acting on your own strength has nothing to do with how you feel and everything to do with how you choose. Hold those hands. Okay, I'm done. Rant over. Thank you for enduring it. Let's finally get into what's been happening in life. The day after I finished the last live demo, I read some of a book called Aquinas by Edward Fazewer. It's an extremely dense book, so it's been taking me a while. After that, I went out to the range of the Wades and we did some skeet shooting. It was actually really fun. I got at least 50% success rate, so I feel pretty good. There's some pictures of Ben. I had to leave early for D&D, but apparently Ben and Dad, had a good time at the Wade's house and sat in the hot tub watching creepy movies. Yeah, glad I missed that. The D&D session was pretty darn good. We fought this super hard boss, but we got extra lucky, so by some magical means, none of us died. Plus, we got to level up. We also got to eat pizza at Neo Group, which is cool. And then I played Halo with Neo for 3 hours. That was fun. The next day I had school and work and went to a pizza place called Panhandlers with Jake. And that was good. We had a really good conversation. Well, I thought it was good. Not so sure about him. Later that week, he told me that our talk about Hebrews 6, the verse where it says it's impossible for those who once fallen away to be renewed to repentance, made him terrified he was going to hell. Because he thinks he was a Christian but then fell away. So, nothing too serious. I tried to explain to him why I don't think that's a necessary implication of that verse. I mean, in the exact sense he was thinking of. But he was set on Hebrews, not talking about renewed salvation at all. So, I mean, long story short, I tried to convince him that he's wrong and sent him an email with my thoughts. But it doesn't look like he's buying it, so I gave it up. Feelers are notoriously hard to convince, unfortunately. By the way, if any of you want to talk to me about this topic, let me know, because I have quite a bit to say. But anyway, I think it was a great talk, and I think Jake enjoyed it, though. The only thing was, due to my lack of sleep the previous night, I was so tired by the end of it. The next day was more school. I worked out with Caleb. I presented my argument from Emerson in metaphysics against free will to my philosophy teacher after logic class, and he kind of looked it over and was like, yeah, that's an argument. And honestly, he's not super intelligent philosophy teacher. I mean, clearly he's not stupid, but I think I might be smarter than him in at least some areas. I don't know. He might even be a feeler, like an INFJ or something. You know, one of those fake thinkers. The reason I say that is because he was arguing in one of our talks that God was the exception to the laws of logic, and if he's really a thinker, I don't see how he could have come to that conclusion. Anyway, we had a talk, and Zach, I think I mentioned it before, challenged Aristotelian metaphysics, and because I didn't really know how to defend it, / didn't take the time to think about what he was saying, I lost that debate, and that was annoying. I also later had a bunch of ideas for prayers that I just didn't have time to write down, which was also very vexing. But I did make it a priority to hang out with Dad and talk some. I've been so busy of late, I've hardly talked to the fam, so I'm trying to fix that. Oh, and then I had Ratchet Christie, which was so good. We talked a lot about hylomorphism, that philosophical notion that things are compounds of form and matter, and how it may or may not apply to the human person. We got into a bunch of other stuff too, but it would take ages to tell it all, and 93% of it, you wouldn't care. So I'm just going to say it was really good. The next day, I was still annoyed losing that debate to Zach, so I had, to mentally slap myself. I'm pretty competitive. And I didn't care. What did I do that day? Just school, work, and youth group, I guess. So yeah, finished school, worked out with Caleb, had some coffee with Mom, and we talked about stuff. I went rolling with Grace, which was good, and finally read some more of Aquinas and took notes. The next day was more school and work, but that night Braden came over, and me and him, and occasionally Ben, played some Smash Bros., which was fun. I'm actually getting pretty good at this point. Oh, and man, the next day, that was a revolutionary day. So you know the Myers? I talk about them a lot. Well, I heard rumors of this aunt that was an expert in Myers-Briggs, and so because I love the Myers-Briggs, I asked Caleb to give me her email. And one thing led to another, and we ended up meeting that Saturday. And we talked for 4 hours. Gosh, that was a great 4 hours. She has this whole map of the sort of MBTI landscape. I really should have sent a picture to you guys. And man, she knows so much more than me. Not just about MBTI. She's got her master's in philosophy as well as theology. This person is the older female version of me, except nicer. Yeah, anyway, we talked about Myers-Briggs stuff, and apparently I'm not an INTJ, I'm an ENTJ. So that was a monumental development. And honestly, now that I've been diagnosed as one, I can totally see it. I think I just consider myself introverted because I absolutely sucked at social interaction. Now I only mostly suck. And so I never really liked, people. Besides that, apparently I write too many papers to be an introvert, which is fair. So yeah, I guess I'm an ENTJ. 3 pieces of confetti fall from the ceiling. Yay! So anyway, that meeting was great. When I got home, I read some more of Aquinas and changed my oil. I then talked to a New Zealand friend, the one who beat me in Polytopia first try. Glares at you. Yeah, you know who you are. We're going to have to remedy that mistake sooner or later. So it was good. I went to Southgate, and Jake did the whole Hebrews 6 isn't talking about salvation spiel. I personally think I handled it pretty well, because instead of trying to force him to see he's wrong, which I may or may not have a tendency to do, I was like, all right, well, I don't agree, but that's okay. But that was a good debate. I felt bad for Jake, though, because he was totally being moved, because everyone was actually agreeing with me for once. You gasp. Alex, you held a popular opinion? Me. Hey, it just happened to be my side. So it was 0% my doing that was popular. You peer at me skeptically. Anyway, it was weird to be on the other side of a mob debate. I've got to say, when you're just one of 5 people asking a person questions, it's so much easier. Mob debates are just unfair. So yeah, the rest of the day consists of D&D, where not much happened, except the party tried to kill some OP elves. And then me and one of the D&D people stayed to eat dinner at Neo's house, and we ended up playing video games into the night, which was pretty great. The next day was a boring one. Just school, work, and reading some Aquinas. The day after that, I had another debate with Mr. Makia, my philosophy teacher, and Zach. But this time, about an idea I had. I was wondering if faith and works might really be the same thing in the same way. Like God is in his divine simplicity. Like his omnipotence and omnibenevolence are, the same thing. I mean, if the notion of the 2 omni traits being the exact same thing makes no sense to you, then you're like every normal person. You should email me and I explain it. Anyway, at this point in time, I don't think it works. Faith and works definitely seem to be truly different things, basically. But it was an interesting thought. I got to play soccer a lot that day, and I got really tired, but that was fun. I also got intellectually roasted by Melissa, aka the Myers aunt, on email. I mean, to be fair, she intellectually roasted me when I wasn't prepared to be intellectually roasted. And, you're like, yeah, that's what a roast is. But I mean, I sent her a paper that I put an hour and a half of thought into, and she just demolished it. If I had known she was going to be subject to so much scrutiny, I'm sure I could have done better. Hold some hands. But it's fine. At this point, she knows more than me, and I've gotten over my pride, so I can actually learn something. I also hung out with Josiah, and we talked about some cool stuff while eating hamburgers. The best way to have deep conversations. And then I also went to Ratchet Christie. Yeah, overall, very intellectually stimulating day. The next day I had school, ran my first red light. Yay, milestone. And yeah, basically I was lost deep in thought while driving about stuff Melissa had said, actually. And I totally spaced that there was a full-on red light. And yeah, I blame Melissa entirely. It was fine though, because the light was just over some railroad tracks and there was no cross traffic. Still kind of scary that I can just zone out so much that I don't notice their light being red though. Potential downside of deep conversations. Also, after that, Ben lost all confidence in my driving ability. The next day was more school, and we talked about morals and philosophy, and holy cow, people could not wrap their minds around deontology. Basically, deontology says you need to follow what the categorical imperative, aka the rule that you apply to everyone around the whole world, says. And because not lying is one such rule, I mean, if you think about it, if everyone lied, no one would trust each other, and lies wouldn't even work. You never, under any circumstances, are supposed to lie. So, that means if a person wants to blow everyone up on Earth and all he needs is a nuclear launch codes from you, and if he asks you, you ought to tell him. AKA, it would be morally wrong to lie, even if you could literally save everyone on Earth. And I know, seems crazy. I didn't realize how utilitarian I was, or society was for that matter, until that class. Anyway, it was a very interesting class. I also talked with God a bit about some people at lunch. Oh, I talked about God a bit with some people at lunch, so that was cool. It was really just a bit, though, nothing like the debate we had earlier. I met with Melissa again, and Caleb joined us for that part, and that was great. Apparently, I haven't been tapping into my NI enough, so that was kind of eye-opening. I went home and, as of eyes, tried to imagine being someone else, in this case, different members of my family, and it was weird. I think I learned what empathy feels like for the first time. I also think I learned I hate feeling empathy for the first time. I don't know, I might do that more. Maybe, or maybe not. Anyway, it was weird, and I gave my parents a hug when they got home. Looks back on the memory and shivers go down his spine. Yeah, that was just really, really weird. Let's move on. We played some Catan that night, which was mildly fun. I'm pretty sure I lost, so that was less fun. And the next day we considered, because this is the usual school and work. One of my classmates, Jacob, seemed almost supportive of theism, which was cool. And I also hung out with Braden and played some Smash Bros, which was fun. We decided to move our theistic conversations to email, where our conversation can be more, directed and structured. The next day, I started a long thing of introspection. More about that later. And I picked up the Myers and brought them over to the house. Then, my knee decided it really wanted to meet my face. Here's what happened. We're playing Groundies, right? For those of you who don't know, it's a game where if you touch the ground, a person can Groundies and automatically make it so that you are basically you're out. So basically going on the ground is risky. Plus, that person wandered around the playground with their eyes closed trying to attack someone if they can. So here comes Seth, eyes closed, groping in my direction. I'm on a railing, about 9-10 feet off the ground, and like 7 feet below me is a platform that I found I could jump to escape from position A, from this position. A while back, it'd take me a while, but I actually work up the courage to make the jump. So he's getting closer, and I realize I've got to jump now, or I'm done for. So I go to the jump, and I slip. The next second in the air consists of mostly me screaming in my mind, ah! And a frenzy as I plummeted to my death. So one foot, my right one, barely caught the edge of the platform, and then the force of my falling body slammed my chin into my knee. The result, as one might expect, was 4 chipped teeth and a not-so-happy jaw. Anyway, it was slightly traumatic, but looking back, I'm really thankful because it could have been so much worse. And then, as I was walking home, still flooded with adrenaline, this song my cousin likes to sing kept playing in my head, and the lyrics go something like, "And if I break my face, and I don't look so great, my face is just my face." So I'm singing that to myself as I walk home in a half state of shock. But yeah, left the Myers house, and since no dentists were around, I went to the ER, which was very boring for 2 or 3 hours. And they were basically useless. They were like, yep, go to a dentist. But they took a CT scan of my face, and my jaw wasn't fractured, so that was good. And apparently I have some weird skin disease that's unusually sinus disease, but that's usually inconsequential. Keyword usually. Shrugs. So that was interesting. Anyway, that was an eventful day. Thankfully, this happened at the beginning of Thanksgiving break, which was a thing here in America for all you Kiwis. So I didn't have to go to school in my present state. I did some more introspection that morning and then went to church. However, because I had somehow injured my tongue, talking wasn't the most pleasant experience, so Benjmeyer just ended up retelling what happened 6 times. So yeah, I ended up leaving early because the whole not being able to talk thing wasn't really working out. But yeah, did more introspection, and then I watched a movie called The Little Princess with fam. Have you guys ever seen that movie? It was weird. Not only because the story was extremely confusing at times, but because it was impactful nonetheless. Seriously, such a strange movie. Objectively and logically, it made almost no sense. There were so many whys, hows, and whats that I have almost no idea what it's trying to convey. Yet, nevertheless, it still seemed to have meaning, and not meaning I could articulate. Just meaning. It just felt meaningful. A mirror image of Alex materializes and slaps me. Oi! What's wrong with you? First not intellectually beating up someone who's wrong, then giving your parents a hug of all things, now finding meaning in feelings. Pull yourself together, man! I blinked twice and rubbed my cheek. I don't know what happened. The other knee glares. It better not happen again. And with that, he disappears with a wisp of smoke. Aside from beating myself up, it was a super weird experience. I wonder if this is what happens to viewers all the time. Yeah, you should watch it sometime. Let me know what you think. Anyway, moving on. Next, I got my teeth fixed. I had this like chip in the middle of my tooth and it was weird. So that was good. I did some more introspection, worked, and then got a lot of snow. We went to a park with like a foot of snow and it was really cool. It turns out Gizmo, aka the dog, really likes the snow. We also watched the first Thor movie that night, I do believe, and there's a picture of how much snow we got. Pretty crazy, right? So next morning, we dug our car out of the snow and drove to the Silver Grill, as is our new tradition, and that was cool. Here's a picture of that. The whole family came, so that was a fun experience, and more importantly, we got cinnamon rolls. So yeah, that was good. When we got home, I was inspired to do what I hadn't done for 3 years, build a snow fort. So for the next 5.5 hours, I worked on building my biggest snow tower yet. Here's a picture. Anyway, I thought it was pretty good. I could have followed out the whole thing and made like a giant igloo, but after like 5.5 hours, I was just done. So I did that and watched the second Thor movie with the family that night. I also finished the first part of the whole introspection thing I've been talking about. Basically, I made a document in which I divided my life into seasons, times I intuitively felt I experienced the most change, and systematically went through every memory I could recall offhand from that season. And then once I couldn't think of anything new, I evaluated my person in that season and ascribed to myself strengths. I used the strengths Gallup provided that I thought I possessed. I did the whole thing for my whole life until about a year ago, though I did intentionally omit some memories for newer seasons as there was just too many. So from that whole process, I ended up writing down around 1,000 memories, and now I have a color-coded list of strengths ordered by time in which they were gained and indicative of those seasons in which the strengths were either lost or did not manifest. So yeah, to put it simply, it was about a 12,500 word long document about who I used to be. The main reason why I did is I heard this quote that went something along the lines of, "You can't know where your life is going from a point, but from a segment, you can extrapolate." So I figured it would be really helpful if I knew where I'd been, but honestly, after it was all over, I don't know, the impact was minimal. I mean, having my strengths over time was cool, but it wasn't too enlightening. And it certainly wasn't because I didn't try hard enough on my part. So yeah, I got that done. The next day, I dug my car out of the snow and went to work. I got home and hung with a kid named Josiah, and together, but mostly me, we built this Lego lightsaber, which was kind of cool. So yeah, that was okay. Then later that day, we watched Thor Ragnarok, which was satisfactory. The next day, I finished my introspection paper, in the end about 15,000 words long, and after examining who I wanted to be, I got some very useful nuggets of wisdom about myself, honestly. So I thought that was way more cost-effective. But hey, at least now I have a document basically of my life history. The next day I hung out with Neo for a bit and took him out for burgers. I dropped him off. As I dropped him off, I gave him this short story by C.S. Lewis called The Great Divorce, which I'll talk about more later. And then I drove to the Myers house with Grace, and together we built a snow tower, a lot like the one I made, and it got dark, so we couldn't finish it, and I was tired. Then that night, the Myers hosted Princess Bride night, which of course I had to come to that. And throughout the movie, people were quoting all the time, and part of me was like, "Is it possible, you warthog-faced buffoon, I'm only lying here because I lack the strength to quote? But then again, perhaps I have the strength after all. Heroic music plays as I slowly stand as the movie plays. Drop your sword." So yeah, that didn't happen. I didn't end up doing any quoting. Kind of thought the mid quotes was kind of annoying personally. But it was good to see it again. Then we played some ping pong and some poker, and it was good. The next day, I worked on taking notes on the aforementioned Aquinas book, as well as reading through the story Neo gave me. He gave me the Great Divorce. I see. And it was pretty good. A bit weird, but to intentionally paraphrase a quote from that impacted me, C.S. Lewis basically said, "Some men are so preoccupied with proving God's existence, they begin to think all he does is exist." And that's definitely something I need to watch out for in my life, honestly. So I thought that was a cool thing. There were a few other quotes I thought sounded cool, but I'm not sure if they're true, so I'm hesitant to share them. Anyway, I recommend you read the story if you get a chance. The next day, I worked through part of the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy article on cosmological arguments. It's crazy how much I've grown intellectually because I was able to track with the train of thought and understand most of the philosophy words way easier this time. I also met with Melissa and her husband, Jonathan, again. Yeah, I didn't mention him until now because Melissa does most of the talking. He just jumps in randomly, sounding wise every once in a while, but he's been at all our meetings. And IDK, it's kind of weird. He's an ENFP, which, aren't usually the most insightful, at least from my experience. But he's broken the mold in some interesting ways. Sometimes it's like he reads part of my mind that I don't want him to read. and / didn't know it was there. It's kind of creepy. Anyway, we had a talk, which was more me being like, than anything else. It's been all around... I don't know what that means. It's been all around a few provocative meetings. I've learned a lot of stuff myself that I had no clue about, as well as learned some cool stuff about MBTI in general. Anyway, it was good, just a little less focused than I would have liked, though granted, the lack of focus was entirely my fault. And after that, I wrote a trash short story. But yeah, that's the day. The day after that, I got an unusually bad grade on my history paper, which may be due to saying Aquinas made atheism laughably irrational and my teacher's an atheist. But then, again, it may be due to that I didn't really... it may not be due to that, and I did really bad in the paper. Whatever the case, I was disappointed and resolved to fix what, in my opinion, small errors had earned me such a grade. When I got home, I saw this guy crossing the street. I couldn't get his car out, so I called Dad over. We helped him shovel out. It was memorable because I've never really done something like that before. He was spinning out, but like always when I see someone that... Nope, that doesn't make sense. But like always, when I see someone I could take time to help, I kind of just rationalized it as like, yeah, I don't really need to do it. But in this case, I thought, well, you ought to at least offer to help. So I actually did. Usually I see something like that and just, just don't act. I know, great Christian move on my part. But this was the exception. And I just found it kind of odd. So yeah, I helped him out, went to work, finished the philosophical article, which seemed quite in the favor of cosmological arguments, oddly enough. And then I talked with Sela, that writing friend I met way back, and it was super awkward. Yeah, her. She's been super busy, so good to finally catch up, though. The next day was more school. I did this risk workout of death with Caleb. Seriously, it burned so bad. And then winged my psychology test. I then did some homework, fixed up my history paper, and then I went to Rasher Christie, where I think we finally killed the ontological problem of evil. At least at the moment, I think the rebuttal one people came up with actually works. So if that's the case, that's awesome. I also had a talk with Ben, which was interesting. The next day was just school, work, youth group, though some new people came. Oh, and also No Shave November ended, finally. And let me tell you, I grew a pitiful amount of facial hair during that month. I have pictures, but you don't want to see it because there's literally nothing to see. Also, yeah, turns out growing facial hair is not one of my strengths. Then again, do I care? Not really. The next day was more school, worked out, and then I witnessed the worst arguments I've ever seen. So my psychology teacher does a thing where after we get grades back, she goes through the answers and we can argue like what we got wrong wasn't wrong because she didn't teach it, and then she'll count it right. Not really sure how this is a good plan in the first place, but we're not going to dwell on it. So what I envisioned was a room full of teenage girls trying to prove they were right when they were evidently wrong. And the results were disastrous. Seriously, I've never seen worse arguments in my life. And they were trying to. Rubs his hand down his face. It was death. I really hope this is not an accurate representation of the average logical skills of teenage females in the nation, because if it is, we're all doomed. Anyway, I suffered through and barely resisted the urge to point out how absolutely trash the arguments were, and ended up with 102%, again, on my psychology test. Seriously, I wish I had recorded the interaction so you could suffer as much as I suffered. Gotta move on. That night, I did homework, read some more Aquinas. Yesterday, I took history test. Really hope I did well in that. Went to work, read some Aquinas, watched some Monty Python and the Holy Grail for the first time, and man, that was a weird movie. I don't think I've seen a weirder movie. Honestly, I'm not sure if I like it or hate it. Probably hate it. Anyway, it was weird. Then today came where I woke up, worked on this email, got my hair cut, some stuff done, worked some more on this email, took Mom out for coffee, went to Goodwill, and then finished this email right now. So yeah, you are now temporarily up to date on this life and that has been bestowed upon me. And as always, if we haven't talked in a bit, I'd love to hear what's going on in your realm of the earth. Talk to you guys soon, and nice job enduring till the end.